would you do without me?
Dude, go live.
Let's
It was
see.
saying preview and everything, dude. I did this once with like a really huge guest too. All right, now we're live.
All right,
Wow,
cool.
thank you for saying something because we would have just been talking.
Well, like I was saying earlier, I will say it again for the audience out there. I can't believe the thumbnail difference in picture quality. So
Yep. Yeah, it's because I hate you.
thanks.
Because I hate you. That's the reason. That's the. I'm just telling you straight up.
That's hilarious.
Tell the truth. Shame the devil. So I'm gonna get my educated glasses on over
Dang, why
here.
do you look so good? I look so blurry on
I'm
this
sorry, man.
feed. It's fine. I guess I
I'm.
need
I
like a
think.
higher res situation.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Whatever.
I mean, my this people who know streaming always rag on like my streaming quality. Um, and it's better when it's just me because I have another streaming thing that I do. I should have done that one. I should have tried to add you that to that one.
Yeah, whatever.
Anyways, we're over here nitpicking about stuff. But yo, if you're watching this, let me see. If you're one of the
3.
three concurrent viewers, I love you guys. I just want to let you know, even though this is streaming on my channel, Tim is going to be interviewing me for his podcast. So this is going to show up on his podcast. You guys have just the privilege conversation as Tim interviews me with his tremendous interview skills. So I'm gonna sit back and see what Tim has in store for me. I don't even know.
My first question is, how dare you? And my second question is, what gives you the right?
I know what movies that's from,
It's from
but
The
I can't.
Office.
Okay. It's
It's
not even a
when
movie.
Michael is getting rid of Toby and he has like this entire plan, and then all of a sudden it turns out that Holly and I think Pam are sitting in on like his exit interview, and so he has to phrase all these like statements in like a very different way.
Oh, that's
What
right, in the
gives
form of
you
a
the right?
question.
Anyway, yeah, okay, so you're on my podcast technically,
Yep.
but we're live streaming on your YouTube channel because you said you wanted more subs. See, I'm gonna blow up your spot. We're fully transparent here at TNE, Matt. So me being the gracious person that I am, I said, sure.
I need some of that
This
clout.
we will share some of this clout with you, no problem. We're very generous. I will say though, for my audience who's listening to this after we did this live stream, it is cool, Matt, talking to you because you and I talk actually a lot
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes, probably like
Almost, almost
daily.
every day. Almost every day.
Close.
Yeah.
And you have been helping me out a ton with making our short form video content a little bit tighter, a little bit cleaner. And I mean, we've had some huge success. I mean, some of our videos have done
What
a
can I say,
quarter of a
man?
million.
What
Yeah,
can
I
I say,
know.
man?
That's why I call you Sensei, bro. Because I gotta say, like when it comes to content creation, you seem to have your finger on the pulse of like what sticks. And there are definitely times where I've done stuff that did fine, but since I've put these things into practice, and also have sent you some of the videos and some of the rough drafts, it's been cool to see that. But I think for my audience, they might not know a whole lot about you regarding like the work that you do, because you're behind one of the biggest like Christian meme pages I think on the internet, period. So why don't you kind of give us like the very short intro to that?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, my name is Matt Matias. I run and own Memes for Jesus. Um, it's been like a huge story behind that. It's a lot of drama behind that Tim has actually been a part of as well in certain ways,
Yeah.
in a helpful way. But yeah, it started by my buddy, who is the first and he's the chosen one of Christian memes, because Memes for Jesus, he started it back in 2012 when there really wasn't any like big notable Christian meme pages. There were like some here and there, but they were like super cringy and just not that good. And he was like, well, so he started making really good memes, and Memes for Jesus blew up super fast, like hundreds of thousands of followers within like months. Um, and he's just like ever since then, he brought me on like in 2018 2019 era, whatever, and we've been making memes since. And he's kind of just like he likes making memes, but I'm like more of the business mind, like CEO type mentality type thing. And we're besties. Like me and him we're best friends. I was the best man at his wedding, and we talk literally every day.
Mm.
Just take it, just take it. And so he just gave it over. And so I'm the CEO of Memes for Jesus. Mike is like this no, I guess Mike would be the CEO and I would be the COO. How does that work?
Yeah. Chief Operating Officer.
Yeah.
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 So it's stupid. It's some stupid meme page. We make cringy memes, Christian memes that we like to, make fun of the cringy stuff in Christianity and just for real.
I mean, can are we allowed to talk now about some of the situation that happened with like the meme war?
When I mentioned Tim being like instrumental in some of the stuff that we've done, or because it was like a lot of stuff that went into page. Um,
Right.
we can talk a little bit more freely about it before because it was like kind of like a legal thing for a while.
Yeah.
And again, this is so silly. This is just it's a meme page. But I mean, what happened was when Mike first started the meme page, a company reached out to him and they wanted ownership or partial ownership of the page so they could
Yeah.
do all this marketing stuff. And he was like 18 years old when he started it. So he was like, yeah, that sounds great because they promised him a check in the mail and stuff. And
Of
so,
course.
you know, about 9-10 years pass and I get introduced to the picture. I'm like, dude, these guys, I don't know about these guys. And that's really all I'll say. I'll just say I don't know about these guys.
Yeah.
And so it came to a point where we didn't want to work with them anymore and they didn't want to listen to us. So we were like, guys, you know what you're doing. So why don't you guys have the page? So we walked away from like 900,000 followers and just, started our own thing. And then when we did that, it caused this massive meme war. Like
Yes,
we
it did.
know some powerful memers out there.
No, I mean, yeah. So
Go ahead.
I got wind of this through some of my anonymous contacts. So I can never reveal them because the work that they do is so important. And one of them was like, "Yo, there's some stuff going down here because it looks like Memes for Jesus just had a big corporate takeover." I'm like, "This is not good." We
Mm,
already don't like mega church. We don't like corporate anything. And now like one of like the OGs, I mean, your page, along with a few others, like Christians Who Curse Sometimes,
yep.
Epic Christian Memes, those are like neutral ground, right? Like me and Honest Youth Pastor will both like the same memes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those situations where we all shake hands when it comes to the meme culture of Christianity because they're oftentimes so hilarious.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my goodness. So then I talked to you and I started doing some digging and I reached out to some more contacts who have some other connections. And it turned out like this whole thing was super sus. It was super sus. And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is unethical. This is wrong. And it's time to join in the meme war. So we did. And
Yeah.
and it wasn't me necessarily like single-handedly, but I would say people in our community and a few other folks that I know dug up some stuff on like this company. And then one of the people from that company reached out to me in DMs. And we went back and forth for a while. And I was like, listen, man, you don't know like what you just don't understand the culture that you are a part of right now. And you don't understand that people will fight to the death to protect some of these pages because of how essential they are for all of our sanity. I mean, people who are fully deconstructing their faith and would now be considered more progressive still send me memes for Jesus stuff or Christians Who Curse Sometimes stuff. Like these
Mm-hmm.
things it's sanity for all of us, right?
Right.
So anyway, I mean, it wasn't just me, but through all of us, I think exploding the story, dude, BuzzFeed picked it up. All
Yeah.
right. We talked to a BuzzFeed journalist and we're like, oh my gosh. And after a long, hard fought war, we got your page back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I think it was definitely instrumental in us getting the page back because you're right. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what they were getting involved with. Because we have so on Instagram at that time we had about 350,000 followers on
Yep.
Instagram and about 550,000 on Facebook and about 10,000 on TikTok. So we had followers everywhere and we were
Yeah.
doing really well. And so we stepped away from it and all these people are like seeing reposts when
Totally.
excuse me, we create original meme content. All right. I pride myself in making very original. I'm not a repost page, guys. Like sometimes
Well,
I'll share something that I like, but
really
like
quick, but
go
when you
ahead.
say repost, you mean taking another meme that's already been created and reposting it on your page, right? That's
Right.
what a repost is.
So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the landscape of a lot of Christian meme pages out there is they'll see something trending and then they'll post it too, and it's like you see the same meme 100 times on your timeline. But
Yeah.
no, we don't play that at Memes for Jesus. We give you the real,
You're
authentic, curated memes for the
yeah.
people. All right,
No, right, right.
we bring you original content.
This is organic,
Mhm.
grass-fed, antibiotic-free,
Yes.
cage-free
Yep.
chicken. You know what I mean? Like, or
Locally
whatever. Yeah.
sourced, sustainable, fair trade, free
Right,
range
right.
memes.
Yeah, it's stamped, right? Yeah, exactly. And I will say, I mean, dude, people were like, they were ticked in those comments for a while because they would
Oh
be like,
yeah.
"Hey, we've seen this," or the memes just weren't that good. Like they just were not good
Well,
memes.
none of them were original.
Right.
You know. No, seriously, they can't make original memes.
No, no,
You know,
definitely not.
and
Definitely
so
not.
you can't just hop on a page that has for 10 years
Right.
made original memes. And it's
Yeah.
like that's what our followers came to accept. So when they started seeing like reposts and like TikTok stuff, bro, what's going on? And they started noticing, they started raging, and they weren't ready for the tsunami of DMs that came. And then you were in your page like, guys, it's a corporate takeover.
It's a
DM them, unfollow. And you were like heading the charts. Like Tim's being humble right now, but he was screaming in his stories
I
and
was
leading.
William Wallace,
Yeah,
baby. Freedom!
yeah. He had the tribal paint in his stories. He was digging up these guys like IP addresses. He was going
No,
crazy.
we dug, dude. We definitely dug up some stuff, and like we found like all the shell corporations and how they were trying to mask all of this, like where their actual location was. I mean,
So
we obviously did that not to harass or to intimidate, but just to try and understand who are these people
yeah,
and what is their actual goal, because all their language publicly was so corporate. Right. It was that corporate BS of like, no, we're just here to make good content. We're not here. There's no takeover. And we're all like, guys, you don't understand. You just stepped into a world of people who either make the sausage still or know how the sausage is made and no
yeah,
longer do it. So
yeah.
don't, you're not fooling anyone by trying to tell us like, no, we're just an innocent company trying to grow the pit. No. Something way deeper is going
I
on.
want my organic, non-GMO
Yeah.
memes, and I want them now.
Or else.
No,
Yeah.
that's what happened.
Okay. Yeah. So you do that, and then you guys got your page back, and now is it mainly just you behind the whole memes for Jesus thing? Like, is Mike or Michael, is he involved at all?
So let me just take a step back quick. So like that definitely, like I said, that definitely helped us get it back. But what happened was like we were prepared to walk away from it completely and cut all ties.
Yeah.
And they reached out and said, "You guys deserve this back, and you guys are phenomenal creators." So like I want to give praise where it's due, give kudos where it's due. They straight up said, "Hey, we're sorry. You guys can have this back," and so they gave it back 100%. And so we don't have to do, we don't have to deal with
Good.
any sus behavior anymore. And yes, to answer your question, it is mostly me. So um my buddy Michael Schaefer, he just had a baby,
Yep.
and
Yep.
he's taking care of the baby and some things that came along with that. And so, but he handles like Facebook and just and posting mostly on there. And memes for Jesus, the like administrative stuff that comes with handling all these followers, and I make all the reels that are on Instagram, on TikTok. Um, I make and post all of those, and I have
Yeah.
some help from some other contributors that I bring on, some buddies of mine that I pay them, because making daily memes is like it's a lot of work.
For sure.
So
For
and
sure.
but I want to make sure people are getting that dopamine hit. They're feeling good, they're feeling happy, and they're able to laugh about stuff that's that we can either laugh or talk about. And so that's what I do. And then I have my personal podcast, Meme Lord Monday, that we're streaming on right now, where I go like deeper from the memes and I talk with some of the Christian creators, and I go more into like the serious topics that are behind the memes, because stuff
Yeah.
makes you laugh, but there's always like a deeper meaning behind the meme. And so
Totally.
that's why I call it Meme Lord Monday, because it's like after Sunday, how can we look at these memes like a meme lord and talk about them? So
Yeah.
that's what I do.
Well, and I mean, most recently, we also won another war with the whole worship leader
Oh
fiasco. So,
yes, dude.
I'm not sure, audience, how many of you are actually engaged like in our content on social media, because I
Yeah.
am finding more and more that like the podcast world is so different than the Instagram world
Yes.
sometimes. But there was another major controversy, really, in the Christian evangelical culture, where we discovered that the term worship leader is trademarked by a company called worshipleader.com. Long story short, they were trying to enforce their trademark on other accounts or companies that had worship leaders somewhere in their name. The biggest one being the brand Worship Leader Problems. And this became a huge thing. And once again, all the meme pages and some others, we all assembled and we waged an all-out, non-dehumanizing, but
Yeah.
intense war of, hey, worshipleaders.com, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And really, it was a whole thing. I mean, we have a highlight on our Instagram. You can look it up. But I will say, as of now, we are 2-0 because Worship Leader finally admitted that yes, we dropped the ball on this thing completely. And they also said that they would stop all of their current, like, I'm not sure if it's like legal litigation, but essentially they were going to back off and let Worship Leader Problems have their name back. Stop, going after accounts with the word worship leader inside of it. So I was talking to Christians who curse sometimes about this. And I said, dude, like, there's a lot of power here. Like, and with great power does come great responsibility. So it's
Yeah.
important that we're always doing our due diligence, because once we announce this stuff to our followers and to our people in our community, I mean, they get behind it pretty quick,
Yeah.
So I would
It-
hate to put them on the wrong person.
yeah. Let's talk about this a little bit. Just, them being like a bully. It was them overstepping their bounds in a way that's like unheard of.
Yeah.
Like for meme pages as well. And so, when you attack memes, it's
Yeah.
like you're falling on your own sword, because it's like, that's, as you mentioned earlier, that's like everybody's watering holes. That's the neutral ground. And
Totally.
they were trying to use, so first of all, the fact, the term worship leader, like,
Dude, I know.
cringe.
Cringe. Like, that is top tier cringe.
Bro. And then like you said, they were bullying meme pages because they had the term worship leader in it. Like, what are you doing? And so, and I mean, you talked about not being non-dehumanizing. Bro, I was pretty dehumanizing, I'm not gonna lie. In my stories, I was like, these guys are disgusting, these guys
Oh
suck.
my
I was like letting them have it. I mean, I blocked them so they couldn't see it, but I was like, these guys are despicable. I did not care, dude.
I
But
well,
yeah, I mean, go ahead.
they operated. So I talked to one of them. I talked to one of the main dudes. I think his name was Josh or something. He's on the website. This isn't like secret information.
Yeah.
And like I did an audio message conversation with him because I didn't want to just do text. And like, it was just very clear that again, this person was in like full on corporate defense mode.
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, you don't understand. Like, you're not dealing with people who like are not aware. Like, I'm a former worship dude for 20 something years.
Yeah.
Like, we know what we're talking about and we know how this works. And they deflected. At one point, they were contradicting themselves.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
all over the
literally,
place.
they would say on a story, we've never enforced our trademark legally. Then on their website, under a different article, it says we have enforced our trademark legally. I mean, like, that
Yeah.
blatant of a contradiction. And then they were deleting comments. They weren't responding. Dude, at one point, they borderline doxed Rogue Worship Leader. And
Oh,
again,
they totally did.
this
They
is all
totally
public
did.
information. So here's why I call it kind of. I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So Rogue Worship Leader, when he got wind of all this a while ago, he went to trademark his name. That way, Worship Leader would not go after them because they had a trademark. Well, whenever you trademark anything, you can look up the trademark, the information is available, and it includes a name and usually an address, but you have to know where to look. Like, it's there, but it's not like right in front of your face. Well, at one point, Worship Leader was screenshotting and sharing that full thing, including the person's name and address, which, by the
Mhm.
way, that person, I still think, maybe not now, but he at least was anonymous on that page up until that point. And all of a sudden, they're sharing the full screenshot with the trademark, the person's name and home address, because he didn't have time to change it over yet. And we're like, what are you doing? What
Yeah.
are you doing? And I think what makes it the worst on top of all this is that this is a page or a company that's like, we just want to honor Jesus. We
Oh
just
yeah.
we're not here to be a business. We're just here to love God and love people. And you're like, guys, we know what these words mean. I've been part of mega churches before, okay? Like we know how this world works. Stop pretending that somehow you're just an altruistic nonprofit, and then here are these big bad people just trying to destroy worship leaders. So
Dude, they're
anyway,
so
but like you
slimy.
said, to
Yeah.
their point, they finally admitted that yeah, we dropped the ball. So
Yeah, memes win. Always. We always get the W. We're in it for the long game too. Like if you even delete our page, we'll make a new one. You know what I mean?
no,
We'll get the same followers. You
it's
can't beat us.
it's like Michael Scott, bro, when he gets kicked out of Dunder Mifflin, he's like, I'll make another company and
Yeah.
another company and another company. I mean, that's what you guys do. We're obviously not a meme page, but we
Yeah.
are. I'm connected to a lot of you, like through the back end and stuff. So anytime I get wind of like something's coming up, I'm like, perfect. This
Yeah.
will be great.
You love this stuff.
I do, and you know what? We have never talked about this before, but I think I'll tell you why I love this stuff. There are two layers to it. First, I think the obvious layer is okay. We care a ton about the Christian faith. We care a ton about evangelical culture still, and like any chance to like help expose bad actors who are doing things that are not good, we want to help do. But on a different level, these things are a lot lighter of a topic than what we usually cover. And I think it gives our audience in our community something to kind of get behind that isn't so life or death for people, but is like, yeah, this is still important for sure, but it's not nearly at the level of like, hey, this pastor got arrested for,
Yeah.
child abuse, So I think it kind of solves that like or it kind of quenches that thirst of like we can laugh, we can have fun, it's still serious, but it's kind of that combination. So
Yeah.
I think that's why I like these. Well, I don't like them, but whenever they come up, I like participating in them because it kind of gives our whole community a break from the seriousness of the work that we do all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's but the corporate and the ugly and the like all the ugliness of the even up in these too, because there's like greed, there's corporate greed,
Yeah.
that shows its face. And um yeah, there's so much to this whole worship leader thing that I think exposes the mega church structure and the industrial church complex in like a bigger light, I think. Because my buddy, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting his name because I'm a dad. What's the yeah, I'm totally drawing a blank here. He's the former lead singer of the City Harmonic. And I've
Oh,
introduced you
is
to
that Elias Dummer?
Elias. Yes, Elias Dummer.
Dummer.
He's the head of a worship leader research project, and they came up with like a lot of really telling statistics. And they basically discovered that like 90% of all worship songs that are on the radio or just sung in churches, they come from like 3 mega churches. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Totally.
it's like the we are so I don't know. It's just disgusting to me. I mean, I'm not good at deciphering statistics and stuff like that. I'm a dumb meme lord, but that just disgusts me, dude. You know?
Well, I mean, dude, listen. Here's the thing. As a drummer for a lot of years in those spaces, anyone who leads worship could have told you that. Like, there are pretty much 3 massive worship groups that give us maybe 90% of the songs that most churches play in this world. Then you have some lower peripheral ones, like you have Vertical Worship might do some, maybe a North Point tune like Death Was Arrested might come into play, and
Mhm.
maybe like a one-off here or there. But as far as like the bulk of the songs you're going to sing, it's either Hillsong, Bethel, or Elevation Worship. Like that is the overwhelming majority of what dominates.
Yeah.
And I mean, listen, music and worship is a passion of mine still, and it is like I think frustrating for me just to see um the amount of like just profit and just industry that is around this thing. I mean, the genie's out of the bottle. I don't think it goes back in, but it
Mhm.
is, I think, concerning, especially because the term worship is so closely associated now with like a musical experience as opposed to the full brevity of what that word actually entails
Yeah.
for the Christian.
Yeah. And like there's so many memes that can come from that too. It's like,
Totally. That's great for you.
one of my favorite memes that, like, I tried it. There's, I've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
Even before I came on Meme Strategies, I was always a memer. And I test, different memes, and I have so much data because I like to
Right.
analyze like how people interact with the memes that I make. There's one meme that I'm really trying to figure out how to make it in a way that it's more acceptable, but it's like the person next to you that worships with their hands up, and it's like they're not wearing deodorant. Like, I've tried that meme so many times on it being stinky and nasty and inappropriate, but like nobody seems to like that. But that's the type of stuff that I think of when I when I think of worship. I'm like, people just stink. And so yeah, I don't know where I came from with that, but like I just think like worship in general, um, because like I mentioned, it is like an industrial complex within evangelicalism.
Yeah.
There's so much cringe there, and you
Yeah.
got worship leader, who it seemed kind of had like this personality where they felt entitled to boss people around,
Yes.
because they had the trademark, and they had like they were used to people just kind of backing down whenever they said, "Well, this is our trademark." I mean, that in and of itself, like it doesn't feel commonplace even outside the Christian world. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think
Totally.
about that?
I, I Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The whole situation, and again, folks, if you wanted to read more about it in detail, we have highlights on it. You can check it out. But it was very clear to me. It was another example of the actions don't match the words.
Yeah.
Like don't tell me that your platform is built on equipping worship leaders while you're also targeting other worship accounts that have just the term worship leader in somewhere in the title. Worship leader problems is not trying to be worship leader at all. It's
Right.
a totally different name, right? Or rogue worship leader. But to have a company who trademarked that now trying to enforce it and trying to say, hey, either you change your branding or else, it's like, guys, I think it demonstrates this sense of like, we're not in this together. You're a threat to me. And
Yeah.
that was what in my DMs with that guy, Josh, he mentioned like the word competitors. And I'm just like, I said, dude, that you just don't get it. Like you don't hear yourself when you think that other people who, let's just go with like the typical Christian evangelical framework. If we're all united in Christ and that makes us brothers and sisters in Christ, and that means that we're spending all eternity together, that means that we're on the same team. So don't try and tell me that, like, hey, man, we're all on the same team while you're also trying to bully out other people in the family because they have just used two very common words that get used everywhere
Hmm.
in the name of whatever Instagram or business platform that they're running, that's also helping people. Worship leader problems, listen, you know me, Matt, we talk a lot. I'm kind of over the whole worship leader culture personally, but
Yeah.
like the dude who runs worship leader problems, what's his name, Brian,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I've talked to him a few times through this. He seems like a very genuine, sincere person
He's the
who
sweetest
just
guy.
wants to help people. I can't listen, despite my personal thoughts on worship and this whole idea. Okay, dude, like, hey, to each his own. You're trying to help people, right? So to have another company like Worship Leader come in and essentially try and bully him to change because he might be infringing on their brand, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
It
And
just
like
shows the hierarchy of priorities for me.
and like you said earlier, when you would talk with them, there would be this weird language. I mean, and not only with the Josh guy you were talking with, like there's the other CEO, her name is Lexi. Um, a lot of the comments you'll see from her or her interactions with people who have her page or commented on the page, it's always like, you know, well, we just want to do what the spirit wants us to do and wants us. It's like
Right.
there's this huge disconnect
Yeah,
on
totally.
like how to behave as a Christian and like what's appropriate in the business world, and just the general tact in and for some reason I feel like this is so common in churches. Like, I love the church. You and I, when we talked, I have deconstructed in the past, and I've since reconstructed, and so that's why I vibe with your page so much, is because like I've been through that. But one of the reasons I think people deconstruct from the church is because of this bullcrap. It's because
Mm,
you got people talking this overly pious bullcrap,
yeah.
saying, "Well, we just want to serve, we just want to
Right.
love, want to do what the Spirit leads us to do," and like while behind closed doors, they're sending cease and desists.
Exactly.
It's like, what?
Exactly. I mean, which does bring us to the conversation. So are you now a full-on raging progressive, far left Marxist
Uh,
socialist atheist who loves Jesus, or like, because you are, for me, someone who's sometimes hard to pin down as far as like where you land on some things that maybe in our cultural moment are incredibly polarizing, right? For right or for wrong.
mhm.
And so, you and I get along great, even though we obviously have different views on some stuff. But in other ways, like, reasonable. And I feel like people who maybe sometimes I think are more, for lack of a better word, more conservative than me, are oftentimes not reasonable.
Mm.
So like for you, I mean, where do you tend to see yourself in terms of like theology and like what you believe now, and like where that would put you on the spectrum of, like, I guess, progressive to conservative? Again, these words are not
Yeah,
always adequate, but
yeah.
they're the most commonly used ones.
Well, I consider myself a conservative, because I'm very I'm
End
very
podcast.
see ya. It's over.
It's
Um,
over.
because I'm pretty hard line on, like, I am unaffirming, but where you and I agree is that we need to, like, show massive amounts of love to the LGBTQ community, like unprecedented amounts of love to them because of how harmful and hurtful and hateful the because I guess, quote unquote, right wing conservative Christians have been. And that's I think that I'm more like, my philosophy is like, where can we find middle ground, and where can we find areas to agree, and really fulfill the total the there's a great commission as Christians, and there's a great commandment. And the great commission is go into the world and preach the gospel, and baptize and disciple and make disciples. And the great commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, and to love one another. So it's like, we those are two things we should be, you know, like, vehemently focused on as
Mm-hmm.
Christians. And so I get very uncomfortable when, Christians are in talking and bad mouthing the LGBTQ community. And I want to focus on ways that we can, like, love them more, because I feel like a lot of the ways that we're treating them is just not, it's just objectively wrong, and it's not loving.
Okay.
So that's been
Yeah.
something that I've kind of harped on the podcast, and it's just something that I've kind of been known for, even though I am unaffirming. And which, if you don't know, that just means that I don't believe that um, the LGBTQ lifestyle is compatible with Christianity. And some people get offended by the term lifestyle, but
Yeah.
what I mean by that, like, those who are in the LGBTQ community, they say, well, it's not a lifestyle. Well, I say lifestyle because I would be more in line with, like, a Jackie Hill Perry, where
Mm.
she would say, I was born gay, I am gay, but I don't live as though I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's the term, and that's how I'm using it, just to be more clear. What do you think?
Well, I mean, right now you're talking to a lot of queer people,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Our we are unapologetically affirming, we are
Mm-hmm.
inclusive, right? And you're talking to people who are probably listening and probably like, yeah, like this is not enough. Like, or someone
Mm-hmm.
might be saying, don't tell me you love me, right? When like you can't even affirm me as a human being and allow me to kind of live my life, right?
Right.
And so there's kind of two layers to this, because I'm putting myself back in the position that I was in for a long time, which is kind of where you are, which is why I'm convinced that one day you're going to become affirming. Um, I'm here to proselytize you, to convince you.
Yeah, I'm getting preached to.
But like, you and I, in the sense of, for a long time in my life, even before I changed my theological stance on this, I have old podcasts and blogs before TNE proving this, old Facebook posts of me realizing very quickly, like, wait a second, this focus in my Christian culture of demonizing gay people and queer
Mm-hmm.
people seems really overblown. It just seems like it's a real massive focus compared to the other, I would argue, bigger themes in scripture than these 5 or 6 verses that we interpret a certain way.
Right.
And so I saw very early on, like, the damage. And again, I was still pretty conservative. I wasn't affirming, but I saw early on the damage of, like, the rhetoric I would hear so often
Yeah.
towards people that would tell me, hey, I'm never going back to church again because my youth pastor called me an abomination when I was 13. And I'd be
Mm,
like, yeah, that is horrible. Like, that's so bad, right? And so I'm kind of curious for you. Like, I, I got to a point before I fully went over to like, hey, I just don't think theologically the it's there as far as like keeping my unaffirmative stance. But I got to a point where I said to myself, can't we at least make room for people who would interpret these 5 or 6 texts very differently than I would? Because we do that
yeah.
with so many other things in the Christian tradition, right? Very few people would say, "Hey, if you're more charismatic or if you're more reformed, you're not a real Christian." Right? Like we debate all kinds of topics and how to interpret scripture all the time. So I am kind of curious, and keep in mind, you are talking to a lot of folks who are
Yes.
queer, right? So just keep that in mind because I don't bring people on the podcast who hold your position super often, but I think it's important to have these conversations.
Yeah.
But like for you, can you at least recognize that other people might see these scriptures different and they could very much be either affirming and or queer and a Christian? Like, how do you see that?
Oh man, that's a loaded question, bro. So like, this is just to like clear the air a bit of where like I want to get as close to the line as affirming as possible because I don't find this to be an essential doctrine.
Yeah,
I don't find this to be an essential issue. What I
yeah,
find to be essential is Christ, Him crucified, and the resurrection, and the life that we get from Christ through that resurrection. So
yeah,
I feel that's essential, and I feel like there's a lot of other essentials that come from there that we need to affirm as Christians. But like, as far as like, and I'm more focused on like how we treat the LGBT community too. Like, I'm not gonna say, well, unaffirming, so therefore, XYZ. I don't mind, and did a whole podcast about this. I don't mind telling some, you know, saying someone's pronoun. I have no problem with that, and I have a problem with Christians that will base their whole platform off of how they are not, you know, say
yeah,
somebody's pronouns, or we're affirming like some type of worldview because we say somebody's name the way that they want us to say it. That's what I'm against. I'm against that stuff.
sure, yeah,
Um, but like, as far as like the that being compatible with Christianity, I'm still figuring it out. I'm not going to
yeah,
say, um, and I've studied this on both sides, and I find I'm more convinced of the unaffirming camp. And I'm open to any other dialogue. I've watched all the videos. I talked with Grace Baldridge on my podcast,
oh yeah,
and
yeah.
we had a really great conversation. I love her. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but like,
You are, but
I'm
maybe
trying to get as close as I
I'm not
can.
trying to put you in a corner. I'm just trying to understand,
Yeah,
right? Like, so this is not like a clickbait situation where I'm
for
trying to like,
sure.
put you in an impossible situation. I'll put it this way, right? Let's put it in this category. I have friends in my life, who would hold to a different view about how a church would function. Regarding like its leadership, who's in that leadership, if
Hmm.
it's elder led, pastoral led, versus how I would see it, right? And we would both appeal probably to scripture, and then we probably disagree on how we interpret certain passages. But I would never tell my friend, "Hey, man, your lifestyle of church or like the way the way that you view church leadership, I don't think is compatible with the Christian faith." So what I'm
Hmm.
asking you is like, for you right now in this moment, do you think that that people can interpret these scriptures differently? You've seen
Okay.
the evidence and say, "Hey, I land here and I'm a Christian." What would your response to that be? Would it be, "Hey, man, sorry, you're just not a Christian because it's not compatible," or would it be, "Yeah, we can make room to coexist and see these things different as Christians"?
So here's where I'm at. I'm not in the business of saying who's saved and who's
Yeah,
not saved.
right,
I'm just not going to go there because I believe scripture
totally.
says salvation belongs to the Lord. That's
Mm,
something that's in his hands.
hmm.
And I'm not going to waste my time in saying, well, if you do XYZ, you're not saved. As far as my position is concerned, like if when people press me on it, because I don't like to go, shouting from the world from the top of the, mountaintops
Yeah,
that I'm unaffirming. Because as somebody just said, Ruth, she said it's an unaffirming is a very strong term. It is.
yeah,
And that's just where I land. But
hmm,
I want to get as close to whatever is viewed as affirming as I can without violating my stance on that. Does
sure,
that make sense? So like, that's my personal view, and I'm not in the business of saying, well, my personal view needs to be your personal view, and in order for you to be a Christian, you need to affirm my personal. I just find that a huge waste of time because, like I said, it's
Totally.
not essential. This is very
Right.
much a secondary issue. Um, if you're sinning, on my view, I can share with you my view on this, but I believe this is just one of those topics that's so complicated and
Mm.
so complex. That's
Hmm.
not helpful, especially in
Sure.
these days and age. Like in the environment we're in right now, uh, the unaffirming evangelical world has done way too much damage to the affirming and the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
So and just the environment we're in right now in America, evangelical America, like Christianity's won. We've got it. I mean, you know what I mean? We are everywhere. We are strong. We are enforced.
Right.
So just about everybody knows about the Bible and Christianity and God and things like that.
Yeah.
And so like I don't need to become a salesman in order
Totally.
to win you to my religion or to win you to my position.
Right.
It's just that's a waste of time. More in the business of, I want to love you, I want to help you, and I'll share with you my beliefs if that's important to you. What's really important to me is, you know, is Jesus, loving you, loving God, not putting it before that. And we can argue about the non-essentials.
So do you think I'm a Christian?
We talked
Like,
about this on my podcast.
yeah, like, do you
I
think I'm
think,
a Christian?
yeah, I think you
Great.
are.
All right.
Yeah.
So there we are. I mean, you just made room for me. I mean, I'm just, I think that's what I was trying to demonstrate, right?
So
In a
here's the
simple way of
difference.
like, I'm an affirming Christian.
Yeah.
I think that the Bible has very little to say about like, what we think is queerness and being in that community and whatever. And you say I'm a Christian. I think I'm a Christian. I think you're a Christian. And like, that would be an example for me of like, the Christian tradition is bigger, like you said, than just like how you land on this issue. Although, of course, I would argue personally that like in our day, there's so much harm being done
Hmm.
by the conservative evangelical flavor of Christianity towards the queer community that I think that anyone, even folks who would hold maybe even more your position, Matt, of like, hey, theologically not affirming, but I recognize that you have a right to live in America. Like, you should have full rights under the law. I'm assuming those are some of your positions, for people who maybe would be there. But like, I'm just saying, like, even that position can still admit, like, yeah, we've kind of like dropped the ball when it comes to
Oh
how we've
yeah.
spoken about this community and how we've treated them as Christians.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, you know, yeah, it's different. I guess it's not the same as far as like the example that you gave. Like, I believe you're a Christian. I believe, like, say that if you were within the LGBTQ community, you know, then I would be like, I'm not going to tell you if you're a Christian or not. That's
Mm,
the way I would approach it. I'd
yeah.
be like, that's your relationship is between you and God.
Yeah.
Your relationship with Christ, and so I guess that's as far as I'll go with that. Does that make more sense?
Yeah. No,
Because like,
listen,
if
I
just
think,
because you
yeah.
hold the unaffirming position to me, like I'm like, okay, so what? That
Right.
doesn't bother me. What would
Right.
bother me, and when we talked about this on my podcast, you hold to the Apostles' Creed, I think you said, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much, and so that's what we talked about. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't be if you affirm that. All the
Yeah.
other stuff
Yeah.
doesn't matter to me, really. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've realized doing this work is that like I know it doesn't matter to you or maybe to me because we're not in those spaces. Like I'm not gay, but
Right.
I think to the queer community, especially queer Christians, it matters a lot
Yeah.
because they consistently are trying to figure out like who is a safe person for them. And then who maybe secretly might like shake their hand and say, "Hey, I love you," and then behind the scenes be like, "Yeah, but they're probably going to hell," and like they're probably just
Well,
being unbiblical. So I
and
think for
that's
them, they would see it differently than how you or I would because of what's at stake. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, I totally get that. And like I said, I try and handle that extremely delicately with my LGBTQ friends. I don't, if they ask me, do you think I'm a Christian? I'm like, I'm not, don't
Mm,
ask God. I
mm,
mean, who am I to tell you if you're, I mean,
yeah.
if I was born in your shoes, I know what I would do, but I'm not you.
Mm,
And, I think scripture says nation needs to be worked out by ourselves.
mm,
Um, so, I think I have a much easier time saying somebody is a Christian when they're not in that. I'll admit that. I will concede to that. Uh, when they are in that community, I'm gonna say, listen, that's between you and God. Don't think that I'm the one that needs to cast judgment on in that regard, because
mm,
that your uh the card that you've been dealt is a very, very complicated one, and I can't even begin to imagine the life that you have to live because of that.
Mm.
You know, and that's
How
where I'll drop the ball. You know,
for
that's where I'll be
you,
like,
how important is it? I mean, again, like I'm just sharing my experience of like kind of
yeah.
going from where you were to where I am now. And like one of the things that really changed
Oh,
me
so you're
on
better
top
than
of it,
me.
yes.
No,
Well, I'm
go.
definitely a Christian, I'll tell you that. I'm not sure about you though. You have to work out your faith with fear and trembling,
Oh
Matt,
my
good
gosh,
luck.
you silly
Uh,
goose.
but I listening to stories from friends who were, I mean, my roommate, one of my roommates was a gay black man.
Mhm,
And just, just learning, just becoming friends with him over time and hearing his stories, and some other friends of mine who I used to work with who were gay, those stories were way more impactful to me than like anything else. Like it
mhm,
overwrote any the Bible is clear rhetoric, because it appealed to my humanness of like, oh my gosh, I was taught that someone like you was this horrible person. The
mhm,
reality is you're actually fully human. And just because I don't understand at the time made me fearful. But the more I get to know you, the less fearful I am. And now I trust you, and now that I trust you and you're telling me your experience with Christianity, and that
mhm.
doesn't match up with my experience, something is wrong. Like
Yeah.
something doesn't add up, because I've never been called an abomination for any of my sins, quote unquote. I've never heard a pastor get on the pulpit and say, hey, whatever, like overeating, it makes you an abomination, or like whatever it could be, right? And
Yeah.
so I just kind of realized like something wasn't adding up, and those stories really started shifting the tide for me of like, this no longer makes sense for me to hold these views. It
Mhm,
just doesn't. If folks were born like this and they're just looking to be loved and to be able to love, this doesn't fit with the view of God I've been given. Like flat out, it just doesn't. And I think my strongest case for this, biblically speaking, is that. And listen, you're very intelligent. You interview a lot of apologists, so I'm not trying to give you a new argument. I'm just trying to give you my view on this. It's
yeah,
like
no, I
we have
welcome it.
no problem jettisoning plenty of teachings, even in the New Testament. I know very few men who would not have long hair because Paul says it's a shame for men to have long hair. I know very few people who insist that we have to greet each other with a holy kiss whenever we meet in person. Even hardcore complementarians don't believe a woman should be quote unquote silent in the church. Right. So, and of course, when it comes to scripture, like, slaves obey your masters, no one thinks today, thank God, we used to, oh,
Yeah.
look, the Bible's clear, right? So to me, it's like we have no problem already interpreting scripture. And for at this point, for where I live in this moment in history, if I die and get to heaven or wherever there is, and God's like, hey man, I know that you had these people around you who were just trying to live and survive, and they were born this way, but my word was clear. So you loved too much. You were too empathetic. You were too loving. You were too graceful. If that's the conversation I have, I'll
Mm,
be okay. It is what it is. But I at least tried to love my neighbor as best as possible. So I think that's kind of how I got there over time, and then kind of understanding the verses on their own terms. I
yeah.
think, and in their own context, kind of came secondary for me.
Yeah, no, I hear that, and I respect that. I respect the position because I know the affirming position has a lot of scholars behind it, has a lot of research behind it. You know, I like I think he's podcast Preston Sprinkle. I like him
Don't
a
say
lot.
those words around here.
I know. I'm sure a lot of your listeners don't like
Well,
him. I think he
yeah.
tries though. You know what I'm saying? In the evangelical world, he at least tries to be loving to them, and I think he's okay with saying
Listen,
pronouns as well, right?
for the record, I mean, I have his book back here somewhere, embodied. He was kind of my gateway drug into a lot of this, to be transparent.
Hmm.
And listen, I fully admit, folks, if you're out there and you are someone who's like, Preston is so dangerous, I hear you.
Yeah,
All I'm gonna say is that Preston seems to be a very polarizing figure in the queer community, because I know a lot of queer people personally, a few authors actually who actually work with him. Okay,
they
but
love
then I
him.
know some other folks who are queer who are like, he's dangerous. He's pushing like a really unhelpful view. So I think he's polarizing even inside of that community. But I do think that like his overall posture, right, of like trying to be kind, trying to be. I mean, in his book Embodied, he says the church should be full of queer people, and he does not
Yes.
mention trying to change them. He just says that the church should be full of them. So I'm like, okay, that to me is like, that's a start. And then we
Right.
can work through like how we interpret literally 4 or 5 verses later on. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe some folks aren't happy with that answer, but like, yes, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and I understand the reaction. Like I empathize with that. You know, why they would view him as dangerous, why they would view people like Jackie Hill Perry as dangerous, why some might be even hearing me and think I'm dangerous
Yeah,
because of the way that people have treated them.
yeah,
It's been abysmal the way that they've been treated. I get that. And like I myself, I grew up in the church and I grew up being, you know, extremely staunch on this position, and I would mistreat people within the LGBTQ community like in youth group. And you know, as I grew up, as I got older, one of the like this one kid in youth group, he grew up and now I believe he's a um I don't even know. I don't want to mess up here because I know this is very delicate, but I believe he's transitioned, and
okay,
so I should be saying she. I'm sorry. But and they saw my mother um in the store, like I think it's a few years back, and now they're a full adult, and they were like, "Yeah, I hate your son because he did this and this, and I almost took my life because of your son." And when I heard that, dude, that that annihilated me,
Mm,
absolutely annihilated me. And
mm,
that's why I have this tender spot in my heart for
yeah,
them. Like I'm not gonna, if somebody asks me, am I gonna go to hell, you know, they're gonna like really press me on that, I'm not gonna retaliate. I don't want to retaliate. I because I understand that they're coming from a place of hurt from my community.
yeah,
It it really sickens me.
yeah,
Just the fact that I've engaged with that.
yeah.
I want to do better. We need to do better. um and so that's what motivates me, I guess. And that's why I say I want to get as close as I possibly can to that line. um and I'm open to discovering what's on the other side of that line as well.
Yeah.
And continue.
Yeah.
But that's where my heart is like, you guys, I understand why you're hurting, why you're angry.
Mm.
It makes sense, and you are justified in that anger.
So, I mean, how angry do you get when you just see so many evangelicals like just closing their eyes and covering their ears and saying, "No, no, no, like we're not doing anything wrong. It's not.
Oh
We're
man.
we're we're just speaking the truth in love." Because I'll be honest, like, and you, this is no secret, but that stuff, I mean, it gets me so
Yeah.
angry because
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you not? I mean, forget just current 2023. You can trace this kind of attitude back to the 80s during
Mhm.
the AIDS pandemic. I mean, Bridget Eileen Rivera, her book, Heavy Burdens, details this. I don't know how, especially leaders in these movements, really believe that somehow the culture that they're helping to build is not somehow responsible for so much of the vitriol that we
Yeah.
see coming out of these spaces towards queer people.
Dude, I get pissed. I get very pissed. And I've made multiple videos about this. Like there's a video that Ali Beth Stuckey did
Oh,
on I'm sorry,
I got to
what's
put a
his name?
trigger warning now for
I'm sorry. I'm saying all the terms, all the
totally.
but she did a video about that the guy that's on the Bud
Oh,
Light
Dylan.
can, Dylan. Yes, she made a video about Dylan. I'm sorry, I'm
Sh
saying guy.
Yeah,
This is horrible.
it's okay. She.
Because I'm thinking about the video.
I
So
understand.
the and she goes by Dylan, correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Forgive me. So she did a video about Dylan and saying Dylan will never be a mom, you know, in
Yeah,
her
yeah, yeah.
amazing cadence.
Yeah,
And
right.
I made a video, like I responded to it saying that you're basically being an idiot. You're being a jerk. Is basically in
Yeah,
fewer words. And not only was she being a jerk to Dylan and the LGBTQ community, but to mothers and fathers too. Just the way that she was carrying herself, just an
totally.
overall net negative. So it's like I was saying this, and she responded, and we went back and forth for a little while. And she's like, "Well, nothing I said," and she was like you said, she was unwilling to budge and even hear the argument. That
Right.
pisses me off.
Yeah.
And that, as much as I identify as conservative and I have the want to identify with that community when they do stuff like that,
Well,
you know?
I have found so I've been thinking about this actually for a while, Matt, and you're actually a good person to run this by
Okay.
because you still would be someone in the, at this point I would call you almost more a moderate conservative than just conservative.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's been this there's been this. Okay, so I used to think of things in like conservative or liberal, but now, especially in more conservative spaces, I think about the far right and like in like hard line conservative. Like for example, Russell Moore, right? Who's a conservative. I've had him on the podcast. He's a conservative evangelical. I
Yeah.
mean, people like William Wolf, if you know who that is, or other like people who are in those far right spaces, they think Russell is like some quote unquote woke, liberal. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wow. So it does seem like there is a pretty decently empowered movement to kind of push at least part of the evangelical church in a more even far right trajectory than where folks like yourself or Russell Moore, or maybe even David French might land, right? David
Hmm.
French, for those of you who don't know, he's pretty much a moderate conservative, like opinion guy. He writes for New York Times, etc. And it just seems like I'm trying to follow this as closely as I can, and I don't know how much longer like the space that you occupy is going to exist, frankly, Matt,
Hmm.
because it seems like folks like you or who I used to be, I'm either now like, okay, like, no, I'm not that anymore, or they're pretty much Ali Stuckey and like Charlie Kirk, sycophants. And I
Yeah.
don't know how much longer you have like this space that you're in with
Well,
these views.
and like I said, I don't identify with it. Like I have views
Right,
that
right,
align
right.
with them. Like I'm reformed too, just like Ali, and you know this. But I think I would align closer to like um Tim Keller. And
Yeah.
and people would think that he's a raging liberal.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
I see
It's
on
like
Twitter all the time, like
how?
Tim Keller.
How?
Tim Keller, the unaffirming pro-life dude. You think he's
Yeah.
far left? Like
That's
what?
I feel like I very closely associate with like Tim Keller's views and the conserve a lot of like listeners of my podcast will be like, yeah, Matt's nothing but a filthy lib. I'm like, bro, are you
Bro.
crazy? And so
Right.
I like that moderate conservative. Maybe I need to start labeling myself as that or a centrist.
Well,
Maybe I don't
I
know.
just feel like one of the key differences is that you're willing to have some empathy and you're willing to understand other people's perspectives and to say, hey, despite maybe even my own personal disagreements, they're still fully human. And I
Yeah.
think what concerns a lot of
Yes.
people in the spaces I'm in now, who used to be in conservative evangelical spaces, is we saw such a dehumanization of the other that seems to have absolutely no signs of letting up. I mean, when you have folks like Charlie Kirk, who is launching Turning Point Faith, and they're in churches and they're speaking at churches and they're doing pastor summits, and it's built on an ethos of dehumanization of the other and making people seem like they're demonic and they're trying to take over the country, and groomers and CRT, when that's your whole platform, and you're attracting other pastors and evangelical leaders who are like, yeah, this is what really matters in the world, is like, I shouldn't have to be I don't have I shouldn't be forced to acknowledge that queer people exist because that's indoctrination. Like when you're at that level, it's like, guys, I can't be here anymore.
Yeah.
Like this is no longer a reasonable position to have, regardless of like where you land politically. And that's why I think a lot of us left.
Yeah, and I talk about that a lot. So like I have a silly podcast where we goof off, but we talk about deep stuff. We also talk about goofy stuff. But like under the surface is I want to help people reconstruct their faith and see that there is validity to it, because there is like this bad rap Christianity has because of how poorly we've handled ourselves um in the public and even within churches, and just the view that people have. If you say I'm a Christian nowadays, atheists seem to have a higher moral standard than Christians do these days. Like online, it's like, oh, you're one of those Christians, you must be a bigot, transphobe, all this other stuff. And it's like, oh my gosh. I mean, and I think some public Christians deserve those terms. Like, please don't get me wrong. I believe that some really do. But Christianity as a whole, I think, has gotten a bad rap because of those weirdos.
Right.
That's why I try my podcast to show that there is validity to church, the, you know, and the church history that we have in Christianity. Um, and there's richness there, and there's love there, and there's kindness there in Christ. And so that's why I try and do underneath the surface. That's like my agenda
Right.
that I'm
Right.
trying to make my memes as propaganda for.
Well, I mean, for
What
the
do you think?
record, what you're saying is nothing new. Like I
Right.
was 18 and realized, again, I want to emphasize for your audience who might be listening to this, like I grew up as John MacArthur homeschooled as you can get,
Hmm.
and was always committed to Jesus my entire life. I went to some more charismatic spaces over time, but always deeply in conservative evangelicalism. Like that is my tradition. I was 18, listening to Paul Washer sermons, still realizing like, yeah, we have given Christianity a bad rep. I would tell people like, I feel like the janitor at the grocery store who's like, you hear on the intercom, clean up on aisle 5, and I
Yeah.
come over, I'm trying to clean it up, right? I mean, I'll never forget. I was at Starbucks or something, and I met a mutual friend. They weren't Christians, and the guy was a gay man. First thing he said to me, "Oh, so you hate me because I'm gay?" The first
Right.
thing.
That's what I mean.
And I was like, dude, first I said, first off, I'm so sorry. I know that so many people who are Christians think that way. I'm not one of them. Again, it was not affirming, right? I still thought, like, well, it's, biblically, where do I land? But even at like 1920, I realized like we have a problem
Yeah.
in the spaces that you and I have called home for so long. And I think what I'm wondering for you is like, what where do you see this going for you? Because I don't it's not it's weird because I hold this weird space of I currently am not attending an evangelical church. I
Right.
got kicked out of my church 2 years ago. I haven't gone back since. But I'm still a product of evangelicalism. It's still my world. It's still what I know. I still talk to people. I am fully immersed in that space, and so I'm still evangelical, even though I'm I guess, new evangelical. But I guess my question for you is like, do you think there's ever a moment where you'll look and say, things are so bad here, I'm not sure if I can like stay in this space as a proponent of this space? Because I'm looking around and I'm like, I'm not encouraged.
Yeah, I get it, man. And I think the church has a huge credibility crisis, you know? Just like you mentioned, if you say you're a Christian these days, you get that response. And um I feel like I'm comfortable enough in my faith and what I've studied, because when I deconstructed, I was agnostic for a year or two, and I just like completely renounced my faith, and I hated everything to do with Christianity, and then had a spiritual experience, I guess, quote unquote, and then I started to pursue Christianity and the history behind it, and the true tenets of the faith, and like Christianity in its purity. I
Sure.
think even a lot of agnostic atheists have to agree that it is good, and it has always been good for humanity and civilizations. Like, agnostic atheist historian Tom Holland, he says, I love Christianity. It's been the best thing that's ever happened to the world. But, he just has a problem affirming God, which is fine. Like, that's his thing. Bart Ehrman, same thing with him. He loves Christianity. He loves Jesus. There's so much richness there. There's so much goodness there. More interested now in helping rebuild the credibility for Christianity, um,
Yeah,
because
but
all the damage that's been done because of the credibility that has been destroyed in the public eye. I mean, what are you
yeah,
gonna say?
but are you talking about the credibility of American evangelicalism or of Christianity? Because they're very different things, right? Like
Oh
American
yeah,
evangelicalism is a bubble inside of the broader Christian tradition, right? So like for you, are you trying to be like, hey, not all of American evangelicalism is as bad as you think? Yes, we have problems, or are you thinking more broadly of like Christianity, period?
yeah, Christianity. Period. I think
Okay,
American evangelicalism is just, I think it's bankrupt. I think it's morally bankrupt. I think it's
yeah,
rotting. A good way to put it. It's full of
yeah.
mold and rot. And it needs, like, we need to do the hard work as actual Christians, people who hold to the true faith, I think, to put it to put it like the Catholics do. I think the true faith is like really sticking to the essentials of Christianity and the person of Jesus, and really like removing the rot and the mold of that, the rot and the mold that has shown itself to be absolutely toxic to the LGBTQ community, to the races, to minorities, uh, it and to children.
Mm.
That's the type of stuff we need to rebuild and do a way better job of. And I grieve for the way that the LGBTQ community, like, that's like always on the forefront of my heart, honestly, because like I have friends and we talk a lot, and I'm just like, and they tell me the ways that Christians treat them, and I'm like, this is heartbreaking, this is disgusting. And
Mm.
so I'm like, I don't want to be a part of that. I'm totally trying to separate myself from that. But I think the person of Christ and the person of Jesus, that's what I want to represent.
Yeah, but
And
I mean, okay, so I'm with
okay,
you on
what do
all
you got?
that. No, no, it's nothing bad.
Go for
So
it.
like here's the thing, right? Is I no longer agree that Christianity, like even in its pure form, quote unquote, is like automatically the best thing or good, because has there ever been the pure form of Christianity? I mean, what
No.
I'm trying to say is, like, throughout history, right, you can point to Christians who have done immense good. I mean, you can thank the public education system in America
Yeah.
was formed by a lot of Christians, right? The foundation of modern science, a lot of
Hmm.
Christians were a part of. Healthcare, hospitals,
Yeah.
Christians. Okay, so what I'm not here to say is, oh, Christianity is all a bunch of BS, right? What I am trying to say though is that it depends on it just depends, because, and here's the thing, sometimes people will say, well, they weren't true Christians, the
Oh yeah.
race-based chattel slavery owners, or the people arguing for segregation,
Hmm.
but these Christians are the ones who would affirm the Apostles' Creed. Like, they are Christian. They
Yeah.
would believe that Jesus died on the cross for their sins and all this stuff. So to me, I view now Christianity like almost anything else, where it can be used as a tool for liberation and to bring heaven on earth, or it could be used as a weapon of oppression. It just
Yeah.
depends on how you see maybe the Bible or authority, etc. I mean, what are your thoughts on that now?
Like I'm not sitting here trying to claim like I have the purity of Christianity, and I'm it's
No
I've
one else
arrived.
has it. Yeah, right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not.
They're called cults, Matt. They're called cults.
This is it, guys. Follow me. I start glowing and ascending towards heaven. No, it's
Yeah,
like,
but we see the string as it pulls you up,
yeah, get him out of here. Like the thing is, yeah, I mess up, and I'm sure that there's huge elements of my belief system and the way that I acted out in public, and even in my family, that's toxic. But I at least want to be self-aware enough to say that the superstructure of Christianity that I stand on, it is good and it is helpful, and it's like the orientation of it is to do good and to be
Sure,
loving
sure.
and to be helpful. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm aiming for, and
yeah,
that's what I think people need to be more aware of when they, so like, I hate the fact that when people, like when you and I would say, I'm a Christian, well, you hate gay people. That I hate. It is a
yeah,
thing, and it needs to be something that American evangelicals say, yes, that's the thing that Christianity is known for, and I'm sorry for it.
yeah,
Because I've been a part of a structure that has perpetuated that. That's what, like, I want to get rid of that whole stigma for
yeah,
my heart's at.
yeah.
Does that answer your question?
No, I mean, I think it does. But I mean, for the record, like, that's why we have the new evangelicals, right? Like,
Yeah.
we also want to be able to show, like, hey, there are better ways forward than like this tradition that maybe in some ways has given me a foundation. I mean, I tell people it radicalized me, like I'm a radicalized Christian because of my faith tradition, and now I'm kind of continuing in that path.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to offer better ways forward that promote human flourishing for all people, not just for white evangelical conservative Christians or something. But
Mhm.
I think what I am always wondering is, like, I think what I wonder a lot is just, how do other, like, what makes someone like Ali Stuckey, for example, so convinced that they are doing the loving thing? Because I hear it all the time. No, 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 we love people. We're just telling them the truth. But I don't know. We're not here just to talk about, like, right wing media, but it just seems like, for me, the reason why I left conservative evangelical either theology or like views is because you had to do so many different mental gymnastics to make everything work congruently. Like,
Mhm.
it was very difficult to be told, like, no, we love people as we call them abominations because we're telling them the truth because God loves them. Then it
Yeah.
was hard for me to believe, like, yeah, God is good and loving. That's why he's predestining people to go to heaven and the rest will go to hell because they're reprobates. I'm like, okay, I mean, I guess I have to somehow square that circle. So I think a lot of people in my position are like, I agree with you, Matt. I think that we absolutely have an obligation to give the world some good news again, so to speak.
Mhm.
I just don't know if my faith tradition of conservative evangelicalism has those tools to actually give people that good news anymore. That's where I'm at with it.
Well, I think, like, the superstructure is the tool. You know what I'm saying? That's my point. It's like, the way that we think in America is because that we have like a Christianized uh there is a Christianized mentality behind the way we think. Like even to question our own faith, that's Christian. You
Mhm.
know, even to the fact that we're seeking progression is Christian.
Mm.
Because before Christianity, there was this is the way it is, and that's it. And there's like caste systems, and you're never gonna go get here. But Christianity presents equality, and it presents reformation within thinking, human flourishing and thinking. And it elevates the last to the first. You don't have that outside of Christianity. So I think the tool of Christianity is exactly what we need.
Hmm.
Just the way that people use it, like Ali, they use it destructively. And the fact
Yeah.
that we can pinpoint that and call that out, that's very Christian in and of itself, in my
For
opinion.
sure. Yeah, but I think it also just reinforces the point that like it depends on which version of Christianity we're talking about,
Oh
right?
yeah, that's the thing. The fact that we can see
yeah.
the fact that we can see schisms within Christianity is also Christian, because
Yeah.
it's seeking to purify, that which is good. And that's
Mm.
a Christian thing. That's progress. And I think we need to. What's up, Than? Sorry,
Who is that?
That's my buddy. Shout out
Who,
Than, exploring reality.
who is that?
He's an apologist friend of mine.
Oh, so he's not gonna like me.
No, he likes you. He likes
He'll
you.
do a video on all of my contradictions and how progressive is so horrible. And
No, he's great, man. I'll introduce you guys later. He's amazing.
nah,
But
no, I'm just kidding.
but like, but I mean, does that answer your question though? I think that sometimes the fact that we can recognize the fact that Ali is toxic, I think that's a Christian
Well,
viewpoint.
you and I recognize that, but her millions of followers think
Yeah,
that she is Christian.
because
Like I think what blows my mind every day, Matt. Like, and
Mhm.
maybe this is why I should get off Twitter. Maybe this is why I should
Yes.
no longer be on Twitter. Because
Yes.
man, I am just like 24/7 triggered by this reality that people like Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, Ali Stuckey are
Mhm.
given so much street cred, so to speak, in evangelical circles as these godly truth tellers. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, not only are they so often flat out not telling the whole story, they are incredibly dehumanizing.
Yeah.
Their perspective is not one of, hey, it's not like one of yours, Matt, where you're like, hey, listen, I have these views. I get that they've been used in bad ways, but I want to find healthier ways forward. That's not the perspective from someone like Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is like, these people are scum. These people
Mm.
are demonic. They're going to ruin the country. We have to get everyone back to God in this flavor. And if you don't, you're an apostate Marxist atheist who wants to kill the country. And it's like, how can you have a good faith dialogue with that perspective? Right.
Mhm.
And so I think that's why I get so frustrated, because I personally, my hunch, then I'll stop ranting, is that we would not be in this like war of like I guess this culture war if Christians were at least kind and empathetic and willing to work with people to try and find a way where everyone's rights can be protected. I'll give you one example of this, okay, and then I'll stop talking. So recently, I'm sure we all know about Jordan Neely. He was an
Yeah.
unhoused man on the subway station. He was yelling. He said he was thirsty and hungry. He threw his jacket down, etc. A 24-year-old former military person put him in a chokehold, trying to, I guess, contain him because he thought he was a threat, and he ended up killing him. All right. Now, I think anyone who looks at the situation from what we know can say, wow, there are a lot of layers here, a lot. I mean, but maybe we can all start with, just because you're unsheltered and you're angry and you're hungry and thirsty, you shouldn't deserve to die. Okay. You would think that would be like maybe a good starting point, but it's not, because immediately right wing media goes into looking into his past. Well, he had 44 arrests. Well, and they start defending it. Right? They what they do is, and Matt Walsh, by the way, called the guy who killed him a hero. So they definitely celebrate this.
Wow.
But it would be very different if the take was, hey, this man was acting a certain way, but we should think about, as a culture, how did this guy fall through the cracks? Okay, let's look at this and think about, how does this never happen again to another Jordan Neely. But that's not the take from these right-wing media people. They are only concerned about spinning this reality where, well, essentially Jordan kind of deserved it because he's been arrested a lot. And I'm like, what Christian ethic are we drawing from? Like, where is that in the Sermon on the Mount? Where is that with the fruits of the Spirit? Where is that in 1 Corinthians 13 with the love chapter? Where is that loving your neighbor? To have such a callous take that, oh, well, because of his criminal history, criminal term used loosely. Usually when you're unsheltered, you have a criminal history because of the situation that you're in, like for dumb stuff like loitering, for example.
Yeah.
That's not the take. The take is no empathy. It is just
Yeah.
it's callousness. That is for me what gets me so fired up. I'm not saying people have to have the views that I have. Okay. I get that there's a lot of ways to talk about a lot of these situations, but the callousness and the cruelness and the dehumanization and the air of, well, he kind of deserved it, guys. He was a criminal after all. It's like,
Disgusting.
guys, you know that we worship a man who was in an empire as a marginalized community member and was crucified by the empire, and he was innocent, and we worship that dude. Like, think about that for a second. So anyway, it gets me all fired up. But
Yeah,
I'm
dude.
not sure if you have any take on that, but I try to get it out somewhere. So
Yeah,
there you
no, I
go.
appreciate that, and it is disgusting. And so I'll say this: I know Joe Lumen is like a very polarizing figure.
I love
Um,
Joe. We're good
and I
friends.
like her a lot too. As you know, despite our disagreements, I really do like her. I had her on my podcast, and she said something that really changed my perspective and how to view these things. She said, because we talked about like how to evangelize in a way that's not hateful, or like, because she talked about how proselytizing can be hurtful, and she had a really interesting take on that. So we talked about that, and I had new as well. So they kind of went back and forth, but we ended up all agreeing at the end, like, yeah, you should probably just love people. But anyways, she said something that really, really like rocked my world, because growing up in church, I had always been told, well, the world this, the world that. And we're fighting a battle against the world. And the world was always people who are not Christians, because they're demonic. They're, they're living in the evil ways and things like that. But Joe, she said she believes that when the Bible's referring to the world, it's talking about and the legalistic and the pharisaical people within the church, and those that we are to love are actually the unsaved. So when the world, when she said, if we view the Bible saying the world is those who would the goodness of the word of God, and that which has been delivered to us, and pervert it and use it as hate and as a sword, as a weapon against those who do not believe it, that's the world. And so I think that people like Ali, like I don't even know these names. I don't even like get into this really. I don't even
You
know.
don't want to.
Yeah.
It keeps you up all night, I promise.
You got Alex Jones talking about they're demons, they're evil.
Can I just add very quickly? I just saw a stat that the right wing world, including people like actual lay people, trust Alex Jones and InfoWars more than they trust NPR data wise. Think about that for a second. Incredible. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, dude, like if we start viewing these people as Pharisees, and I think a lot of American evangelicalism has become pharisaical, because they use that which is supposed to be good news as a weapon, as hatred. When you start calling people demons, I think that's about as antichrist as you can get. You got people like Matt Walsh, like you said, and Ali talking about they will never, these get like it. That's actual demonic activity right there, in my opinion. That's the real world. That's the real evil of the air. A lot of Christians like to over spiritualize, talking about how demons are in their, the freaking plants in their home. The demons are on your TV telling you that the people that are dressed weird are demons and are evil, when they're people. They're made in the image of God. Like, treat them like humans. Treat them as, as equals.
Right.
I've heard actual preachers say there's no such thing as equality. You don't treat the president the same way you treat a beggar. Like, if that doesn't scream religiosity,
right. Or just bad theology, that's the whole point of Jesus.
Yeah. That's how it's so bad. Yeah. And so that's what I feel like is American evangelicalism is devoid of Christ. And if we get back to what Christ actually says and the way that he treated those that, you know, he would quote unquote like would be the unsaved or whatever,
Right.
the world,
Yeah.
we have to really observe the way that he treated them. And okay, I'll stop with this. So as much as I dislike Ross, he said something recently that I totally agree with. He's like, Jesus didn't hang out with sinners. Sin hung out with Jesus
Mm.
because, you know, they came to him because they felt his love and they felt his acceptance. So I think if we're going to use that analogy, like what Jesus hung out with, we need to remember that we need to posture ourselves as welcoming, loving, accepting, you know, primarily kind, gentle, loving, full of hope. Those things are the things that we should be, people should see in us before they see a line drawn in the sand. Views, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm reading JP's comment here. It is interesting. I think the issue I have that makes me not want to be involved with the TNE community is that most content is often presented as these views are the only right views. No nuance, no dissension. I don't understand. JP, listen, my man, with all due respect to you, I do not understand this comment. I don't know how else to say it. You're first off, Matt, you're on the podcast. I've interviewed Samuel Duth, he's a Christian nationalist.
Yeah.
I've interviewed Russell Moore. I went to Turning Point America Fest for 4 days and did content on that. I've interviewed Honest Youth Pastor.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I just don't know how else to demonstrate to people that I will almost talk. In fact, I've talked to people that I can't even air the conversation. I talked to someone one time that it was so bad. This person denied the Holocaust to me. And that's when I said, okay, I can't air this conversation. There's no benefit here. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe on social media, our reels are too direct or whatever it is. But like the idea for me that we just have no nuance or dissension, I just think is like very interesting. Personally, everyone, to each his own. But I am always surprised when people give me this feedback because I'm
So
like, where?
let me talk for you here because I know
Oh,
you're
go
talking,
ahead,
you
Matt.
know, as the witness to Tim. So I've known Tim for a while, and like I said, we talk very often, and we disagree. Like we know what we disagree on, but everyone that I interact with, that when they talk about Tim, they always say that he is fair and he is honest and he's willing to receive criticism, and that's the experience I've had with Tim too. So I get what you're saying, JP, but like, um, you know, might just be looking at the content and not, you know, who Tim actually is and what he represents. And I think that Tim, he's willing to show nuance and he's willing to engage with the opposition in a fair and in good faith way.
And I will Venmo you your $100 after this episode. Thank you,
Okay,
Matt.
so
I mean, I mean, listen, so friends who are listening to the podcast, after this is not live, JP is someone in the comments. That's who we're
yeah,
talking about here. Well, I'm assuming he says I'm mostly referring to social media content, which by the way is very fair because our mission statement is that we hold space for folks marginalized by the evangelical church, and we advocate for accountability. So what we tell people often, well, by often I mean we've said it many times, and we have a highlight on this, is that anyone is more than willing to look at our content, to engage our content, to be in our Facebook group, the whole nine. But we do prioritize certain perspectives over others. And if you're someone who comes in with a more non-affirming position or a more conservative position on certain things, we don't hold space. We don't elevate that position when it comes to that, right? Not saying you can have that view, but just know that the people that you're talking to are people who are probably going to push back pretty hard on that. So I get for some people, they can see it as like an echo chamber. I totally understand. But also most of our community are folks who are just trying to heal from like legitimate, deep traumatic situations that happened in their churches. So, but we tell people, and JP, I'm not referring to you here. I'm just saying, I'm using your example as like a way to kind of springboard into this conversation. What we tell people is that we see the Christian tradition like a house, a massive house. And a lot of us grew up in the told this is all there is to the Christian faith. Like if you walk up those stairs, it's a desert wasteland. So just stay down here. And eventually things got so stinky and moldy and like unlivable that we took the risk and walked up those stairs and we went, holy moly, there's a whole house here. Like, and it's big, it's really big and really complicated. And there's tons of rooms. And I didn't know this existed till like right now. And I thought I knew what it meant to be the only thing that is Christian. So we're kind of that first room for people who walk up, right? And we're the ones who are saying, hey, you can breathe up here, you can vent in this room, you can let off some steam, and we're going to prioritize the folks who have walked up and who want to think about things a little bit differently. So that's kind of how we see ourselves. And then we offer tours of the house via our theology classes. So I understand why people who would not be in that position might think that we're just like an echo chamber, or that we don't allow for all views, because in a way they're kind of right. We definitely have a certain perspective that we're trying to prioritize over others. At the same time, me personally, I think this is what JP was saying. Me personally, and the podcast allows for these kinds of conversations, Matt, right? Because
Yeah.
our Facebook group is like, for so many, it's a safe place for them. If you and I had this conversation in the comments, it would never happen, right?
Yeah.
Because people they're not there for that conversation. But the podcast, you can have these dialogues where you're not going to agree, and you can give people the option to opt in or to opt out. So anyway, JP, I gave you a lot there. I'm sorry, but I while you brought it up, I wanted to at least mention, just maybe some more of like the thinking behind the work that we do and why we do the content that we do. We definitely have an audience in mind, and it's not the conservative and it's not the moderate in many cases. And at this point, I'm totally fine with that. It just is what it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, and like I said, I deconstructed back in 2009, and I understand the pain that is associated with that. So what you're doing, I really appreciate, because people going through that process, like I wish I would have had something like this when I was going through that time.
Yeah.
And blessed enough to have people that were in my life that were literally like hounding me and loving on me so much that I was like, oh, fine, I guess I'll become a Christian again, whatever.
Right.
I was like loved into Christianity again, which I think is a huge blessing. But what you're doing, I think, is basically that. You have a community that welcomes people that are hurting and questioning their faith, or damaged from the faith, burned from the faith, and they have a place to seek refuge. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I tell people a lot, and I mean, I know we're talking about me here, but whatever. I tell people a lot, like, we try not to become fundamentalists all over again. However, there definitely are some like non-negotiables I think I have for and that the community has. Like for us, queer affirmation is like a non-negotiable. Like, we're not going to capitulate on that. That
Right.
being said, I have no problem talking to people who wouldn't hold those views. But as far as the organization goes, we're always going to do our best to prioritize the voices in that community because of how marginalized they've been historically. So if someone comes in and is like, I don't get it, guys, I'm not talking about JP here again. Just want to be clear. I'm talking about whoever comes in. It's like, I don't get it. Why can't you make space for me just because I'm not affirming? It's like, because you can go almost anywhere else
Mm-hmm.
to do that. But this place, we are unequivocally affirming, and we want to give people, especially queer folks who have been so marginalized, a place where their voices can be elevated. Same thing for Black and brown bodies and Indigenous folks. For women, we do our best. We're not perfect at it, of course. But there definitely are some like, I think, bare bone, like, foundational principles that we hold as an organization that we're still kind of fleshing out, but would definitely prioritize some voices over others, even though we would allow anyone to join the group or to engage in our content and at least spectate and witness what was happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to me. I don't know if you're
No, that's
talking to me.
good. No, see how easy that was?
Yeah.
See, JP, it's so easy. Just be like me.
Say yes. Say yes.
So, I mean, what do you think the future is, Matt, for like the world that you and I are swimming in? Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a middle. I don't see a middle happening anytime soon with
I
like
think.
queer inclusion, things
Mhm.
like that. Like, I think it's either going to be a matter of you are or you're not, and if you're not, do your thing. But like, if you are, we're going to keep moving. That's just how I see it.
Man, that's such a because oh man, I don't know if I can share what we talked about that you went to the other day that I said every church should be doing this. Can I talk about that?
Every church should be doing. Oh, the thing that I did over at North Point.
Yeah, can I talk about that? Are you
Why
okay
don't
with it?
I say it? Because I know what I should say, shouldn't say, and then you
Yes.
can kind of riff off that. So yeah, so I was at Andy Stanley's church a little while ago. They have a program called Parent Connect. This is a public program. It's not a secret. Where essentially they help people who have queer kids love their children better. Is what they do. And so I went to one of their big events on a Monday, and they had a fully queer Christian panel On the stage, all different people. One, everyone from two women who were gay, an older man who was married who was gay, a black man who was gay, and also a trans man. And essentially, the person who asked questions just asked them questions about what it was like being Christian and discovering that maybe they were queer, and they were hopefully were trying to help parents in that room learn better ways to love their kids who are queer. That was essentially what they do. So that's what I was a part of, and it honestly for me it was beautiful and really hopeful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the church is concerned, I think we should be making space for the LGBT community to feel comfortable. At least, at the very least, they should be comfortable within the four walls of a church, whatever the view should be. Like if they're not there, there's a big problem. I think, like I said, Christ himself was extremely welcoming. Um, and so I think, I think that that's something that we should be working on. I think that's what's in the future is for churches that want to be quote unquote inclusive, they should be making space for conversations with the LGBTQ community, whether they agree or disagree on certain topics or not. I think we should blur a lot of the lines of the um and that's as far as I'll go with that. Like I said, I
Yeah.
want to get as close as I can to believing what they believe without there being a compromise. And I think that there's a lot of like way more room than a lot of people in my camp are willing to admit. Like, call them by their stinking names, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Say their name. What's your
Right.
problem?
Right.
You know what I mean? If they want to be called whatever they want to be called, just
Yeah.
call them that. Like because I think my community has drawn the line so far back that's why there's so much hurt and hostility. It's like you won't even say their name. Are you
Right.
freaking kidding me? Like,
Right.
how humanizing can you be? To use your words, like, and that's where I think we need like my camp. I don't want to say the U word more because I've said it enough. Um, I think that's I would like to see that more in churches. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if
Yeah.
we're going to be able to have churches like that. If I was a minister, I would grapple with that um, like a lot to see how we could make it, a church a place that is welcoming but also standing firm on position. And I think what Andy's doing in his church, I think, I think that's beautiful. We should
Mm.
have so because like maybe there's people in an unaffirming church, sorry, that have kids that are within the LGBTQ community, but the parents are not, affirming. There needs to be conversation there. There needs to be reconciliation within the home. As a Presbyterian, the homes, the family nucleus is extremely important. It's the building block to society. So if those aren't getting worked on within the church, like that is, we're in critical condition if that's the
Mm.
case.
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how to predict the future. That's what I would
Yeah.
like to see happen. But who knows, man?
My prediction is that in evangelicalism in general, I've been reading a lot about our own history the past like couple of weeks, and it's been very eye opening. I
Mm,
think that we're seeing another push to push evangelicalism forward, but the reality is that the institutions of evangelicalism are so powerful and so cemented and so
mm,
conservative that they will probably snuff out any attempt. It's not lost on me that our attempt to swing the bat to change things is going to meet a lot of resistance and might not even be realized at all, if not many years after this work stops.
yeah.
But I do think that, like, especially people who are products of this culture, I just feel an immense obligation to do everything I can to push things in a more beautiful, loving, and also honest way. I don't even just mean around like the queer community. I mean like how we view the Bible, how we view the Christian tradition. It's frustrating to think that for 30 years of my life, I really thought I knew all the different Christian streams because I knew about the charismatics and the reformed, and that was it. It's like, okay, Arminian Calvinism, the two dominant ways about thinking about God's power. And then you're exposed to like Eastern Orthodoxy for the first time, and you're like, oh my gosh, like they're a totally different room.
Yeah.
Didn't even know they existed, but like faithfully Christian. What
Mhm.
do I do with this? So I think that a lot of us have an obligation to take our faith more seriously.
Yeah.
But that for me means realizing that we are participating in a very big, complicated, and not monolithic tradition. We're just not,
Yeah.
and I think that's important to recognize.
And okay, something you said really reminded me of something. A lot of apologists, like big apologists, like William Lane Craig, are like evolution affirming. So there is a big reform
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
like things that American evangelical church has held like very strongly. So there's a lot of reform happening there. And I was a former Assemblies of God minister, and I have some insider news that probably within the next 10 years, there's going to be a massive split between an affirming AG church and an unaffirming Assemblies of God church, like a big one, like a big split. Because a lot of Assemblies of God churches, apparently, like the ministers are low key affirming. Um, so I think if anything, there might be splits, lots of splits and division and
Yeah.
schisms as far as like things that people have held as core doctrines. I guess I don't know.
Well,
That's
this
I
is
mean that's
kind
what
of
I'm
our
hearing.
history, man. I mean, like the whole split thing, this was slavery, this was segregation. This is what has happened over and over again.
Hmm.
And I think for me, I just told myself a couple of years ago, like, I'm not going to be behind on this issue. Like, I'm not going to be someone who looks back in 20 years and goes, man, if only I saw, then what I see now. I just told myself I want to be on the cutting edge of pushing things forward, because from my vantage point, some of the big issues in our day, in our cultural moment, historically in American culture, evangelicals have not always been on like the dominantly or like the dominantly right position. And the ones who were on that position were kind of snuffed out. So I told
Hmm.
myself, like, you know what? If people think I'm wrong now, but we end up being on the right side in 10 years, I'll take it. I will absolutely take that, because we can look back now and see how crazy Bob Jones was for demanding that the races stay separate because God
Yeah.
ordained it, right? Like,
Oof.
no one now, well, not no one, many of us now don't look back and go, man, Bob Jones was a great fundamentalist who really understood the word of God. Even my most fundamentalist friends think that Bob Jones was crazy for saying that, right? So what might seem so clear now might not be so clear in 10 years, 20 years from now. And so I think for me, and I think maybe the folks that I work with, we're kind of done being on the wrong side for too long. I want to just go for it and say, this is where I land. We're pushing that way. And one day we'll look back and say, hopefully, right call.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, man.
Anyway, dude, listen, we talked a long time, man. I mean,
Yeah.
holy moly, hour and 40. This is like a Trip Fuller podcast. Oh, how does he do it? I'm famished over here. Where can folks find you, man? I mean, you're obviously all over the place, but
Yeah.
plug away some of your socials if they want to
Thanks,
follow you.
man. Well, my big page is Memes for Jesus. You can find it on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I just make goofy Christian memes. It is the OG Christian meme page of the internet. And Michael Schaefer is the man. He's the chosen one, like I said. And then my podcast, if you like hearing me rant and babble and talk with other Christian creators on both ends of the spectrum, like I've had Tim on my podcast, I've had lots of conservatives on, and I focus on reconstruction. It's called Meme Lord Monday, and that podcast can be found wherever podcasts are. I also have social media, but I don't really do too much with social media. So I'd prefer if you listen to the podcast or watched on YouTube some of the interviews. So Meme Lord Monday or Memes for Jesus, either one of those, I'd be happy to see you.
Sweet. Matt, it was great talking to you. Live audience. Hey, we now have 12 people watching. We've more
Yay!
than tripled our numbers. So thanks for hanging in. And audience, if you're listening to this podcast and you enjoyed it, would love your feedback on it. Shoot me a message on Instagram. So Matt, I'm sure I'll talk to you tomorrow when I give you my newest real idea and you say this is trash. Your hook isn't good enough and it's too long and too wordy and I have to redo it. So I'm sure
I
I'll
hate
talk to you more
everything.
tomorrow. Yeah. Thanks, dude.
Thank you. Take care. End stream.